Obviously, rock music is a big part of your identity. It defines you.
It was the major source of interest, inspiration, passion, heartfelt everything in my life, as it has been from the day I saw Elvis to today.
I was a DJ at my college radio station, and it was a 50-watt station. Not quite Wolfman Jack, who was 50,000 watts, but I know. And
hey, you entertained yourself. That's all that counts. You heard your music.
And when people would call me up and say, will you stop playing that weird stuff? I said, right now, what would you like to hear? And they tell me, and this is what I would put on.
Yes, sir.
You know, nothing will shut up a fraternity group like Help 'Em a Rock.
I had a little band for a while. I built up to have a drum set. My dad made me work, which was a great lesson to learn the value of things. I worked to buy a snare drum. He helped me with some of the money, but I had to work for it. And I had a garage band with some friends, and we actually made money doing it. So it was fantastic.
What was the name of the band?
We started off as the Four Bad Habits, and somehow that was a very good title. And somebody decided it was too wild, I guess, for us. We were very straight-laced with these jackets on. So we became the Four Dimensions.
You started liking rock music, but you were in a surf band first, right?
Absolutely, yes. We did shows, obviously opening for Sly or Mamas and Papas,
wow,
things like that. There were theaters all around Los Angeles, like Melodyland theaters that spun around, you know, like community theaters and stuff, but really fun to play.
My big claim to fame in high school was that I got the leads in 2 of the musicals there. I was Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, and I was...
you were Tevye? Give me a little Sunrise Sunset. Go, just a little Sunrise Sunset.
Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. Well, how about, Little Bird, Little Chavala? I mean, that I don't even know if that one made it into the movie.
That was one of the best things we ever did, in my opinion. Getting to know Mark Bolan and working on the T-Rex stuff. I loved it so much. I loved working with him. I loved Tony Visconti as a producer. And the stuff that Mark Bolan was doing was revolutionary. He was the cosmic punk. He lived it, he dressed it, he talked it, he wrote it, he invented it.
I joined a band called Sweet Stave and Chain in Philadelphia. So we started playing the Olympic Auditorium. Eventually, we played with Cream at the Spectrum in Philadelphia.
Wow.
That was sold out and unbelievable. And we played with all the blues. And we played with the Electric Factory all the time.
That was a legendary venue.
And we opened for Buddy Guy. And we opened for Chicken Shack. And we opened for 10 years after.
And then, Howard, everyone's got to have a hungry heart.
You know, and singing with Bruce is another trophy that I'm very proud of. I loved that guy. And it was a fluke that it happened. It was just another case of Flo and Eddie being at the right place at the right time. All throughout history, we've kind of lucked out and paralleled some of the greats. If we haven't been great ourselves, at least we've been in spitting distance of some of the greats. I mean, that's plenty for me. I don't need to be Lenny Bruce. I can be Martin Mull. Got to California in 68, 69, played in bar bands. That lasted until 1970, maybe 71, when I started Fear. Actually, the first incarnation was a trio, me, Johnny Backbeat on drums, and Dirk, the bass player.
At the Fillmore, I had 2 cameras, 2 Nikon Fs, one body with color film and one with black and white. And I carried a bag with 7 lenses, prime lenses, no zooms, which I interchanged. I bulk loaded all my own film. And if I didn't finish a roll, we'd leave it in the camera and use it up when I started again the following weekend, which is, thank God, the only way I've been able, in many cases, to date my photographs.
Do you remember what your earliest concert was and what your favorite was?
My first concert was Jethro Tull. My second concert was Led Zeppelin Black Dog Tour. Unbelievable. And that was my favorite concert. My second favorite concert was Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti Tour. And then my other favorite concert would have to be Paul McCartney.
It was kind of embarrassing. The first concert I ever went to was that band Bread.
And the best concert?
Oh, God, I've seen everybody. James Brown.
My first concert went to see Donovan on the Smothers Brothers show. My sister won tickets or something, and we went, and it was great. And Dion was there, and he sang Abraham, Martin, and John, and it was like,
Wow.
it was fantastic.
My first without the parentals was Grand Funk Railroad with Black Oak, Arkansas opening. I remember.
Oh my God, there's a name.
Wow, what a bill.
Yeah, yep.
Ever see the Screamers? They were
They shared a bill with them
so
once.
great, really, and they never put out an album. I was at Jimi Hendrix New Year's Eve.
Me too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So jealous. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But I heard, everyone. I mean, during that time was like the Moody Blues and the Rascals. And I mean, I saw Janis Joplin.
Did you?
I saw Janis Joplin at the University of Miami. And of course, loving like more musical comedy, I was like, what am I looking at? But of course, you couldn't help but be like, holy hell. Hendrix, I saw Elvis Presley. I mean, I was very lucky and didn't know it.
Little Richard really was, for me, the essence of this new music.
Yeah.
Bill Haley and the Comets, he's supposed to have invented rock and roll or something, but it was bullshit,
Yeah. No.
It was like old grandpa singing. But when you saw Little Richard, Jesus. And the Brits had, of course, Lonnie Donegan and Skiffle. He was an amazing talent.
My first few concerts, my dad took me to almost every week at Madison Square Garden. They had these oldies but goodies concerts.
Yeah, I remember those.
And they would have Chuck Berry and Chubby Checker and all these phenomenal groups, and and I would listen to that.
Murray the K at the Brooklyn Fox.
Murray the K looms very large in all of our lives.
And it would be a show of between 12 and 15 acts. On the same show, you would go there, and for your 50 cents or 75 cents and a movie, you would get the Miracles, Little Anthony, Martha and the Vandellas, the Shirelles, the Temptations. I remember hearing a 13-year-old kid playing the harmonica, Stevie Wonder, doing fingertips, Mary Wells, the Four Tops, Marvin Gaye. I mean, there was always the Apollo.
Yeah.
And we would go up there. I mean, I saw Ray Charles, I saw James Brown, I saw Jackie Wilson at the Apollo when I was like 15 years old or 14, 15.
I saw the Stones. I saw, Stevie Wonder. I saw everybody who I liked. Crosby, Stills and Nash and Neil Young. And I saw Elton John the very first time he came to the United States.
I saw him at the Troubadour?
Yeah.
Well, those are famous shows.
Yeah, I saw those. I was just really into music.
I mean, remember going to see Lee Ving?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of my favorite concerts and stuff, going to see Fear.
Yeah.
And he was like funny. I mean, he'd like tell jokes in between the songs. And he was like just way out there.
I had seen Dylan at the Forest Hills, going electric. I'd seen the Rascals. And I'd been to the Cafe A Go-Go. And I saw the Grateful Dead. And I definitely had seen Patrick Sky, Donovan solo at Town Hall, and Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and the Jim Kweskin Jug Band.
Oh, I love Kweskin.
Actually, one of the first concerts I went to was Pete Seeger at Carnegie Hall. And they arranged for us, there were 200 of us got to sit on stage.
Oh, nice.
We'd go as the Golden Vanity in Boston, where drum players sang every Thursday night. I saw Reverend Gary Davis, I saw John Lee Hooker there. 1,600 people at the Music Center. We saw Chicago, and they brought it. I mean, we were all going. We all had dates, It was just unbelievable. And they had the brass, and they played forever. I mean, they just didn't stop playing. That was life changing. And then the other one, which is this was at the fairgrounds, 10,000 people, and it was raucous for Rod Stewart. And Rod Stewart gave the Prairie people, the Oklahomans, a show they'll never forget. I'll never forget it. You saw the #1 off-the-road band of all time for me, The Who.
Yeah. Oh, no, I saw them several times. They were my favorite rock band. They are my favorite rock band.
If you saw them at the Phil Maurice, you saw Prime.
I saw them at a Murray the K show with Cream on the same bill.
That's
And
a
it was
legendary show. And Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels.
exactly. And Ian and Sylvia were in that show. Wilson Pickett was in that show. My mother took me. And I remember my mother kind of getting bothered when he took off his shirt and started walking up the aisle. It was like, is he going to come too close to me? You know? Because I was too young to go to the Translux 58th Street by myself, you know.
I love the Who. Holy mackerel.
No problem there.
Obviously.
You know, in the late 60s to the early 70s, I saw them maybe 30 times because they came to the Fillmore East so much. And they are the most exciting band I ever saw.
I still marvel at Keith Moon. I've never seen anything like him. He wasn't even a drummer. He was a force of nature. He had sticks with him all the time. He was playing on tabletops and cups and everything until he got to those drums. He was just charged.
You remember the Troubadour, of course.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, you'd go there and you'd sit 15 feet away from Joni Mitchell or Jackson Brown, or Richard Pryor would come and be on the bill there for a week, or
So you'd
Albert
be at
Brooks.
the bar with the Eagles.
Exactly. That's right. With Don Henley and with Glenn Fry and, you know, the gang and Timothy Schmidt. We lost Glenn, of course, but I get to see a lot of those guys to this day. I've remained friends with them.
My first concert on my own was Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin. The opening act was a Jeff Beck group with Rod Stewart, Ron Wood, Nicky Hopkins. And I'll never forget the first time I saw the Ramones, which was a mind blower. But then I saw them with the Whiskey several times. And just various punk shows around LA were just absolutely exhilaratingly anarchic and energetic and wonderful.
Yeah, if you saw X in LA in the early 80s, you saw rock and roll as good as it gets.
One of the most memorable shows I ever saw was the first night that the Mothers of Invention played the Balloon Farm on St. Mark's Place. And
Fantastic.
it just completely fractured my brain.
Did you go to the Fillmore East?
Oh, yeah. No, I saw Frank Zappa there.
Those concerts were hilarious.
They were hilarious. Hilarious. I mean, I love Frank Zappa is just, you know, one of my heroes. I mean, it's just amazing. Yeah, no, I saw Humble Pie.
You know what, Miles? Not to say that it wasn't a great thing to see Humble Pie, but they played there every other week, I think.
No big deal. No big deal.
The first record I remember buying, you're gonna laugh, was DJ Thomas. Was that his name? BJ Thomas, Hooked on a Feeling. And it was the little one that
45.
had, yes.
Fingertips, Little Stevie Wonder.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
That is like 4 minutes of excitement.
I know. I couldn't believe it. I was, you know, blown away by that. But the first album I bought was Meet the Beatles. I have every single Peter, Paul, and Mary album, every single one.
They were good.
I still have all my albums. I have every album I ever bought since I was a teenager.
Back in those days, in the early 50s, kids had these little golden records, but there were a couple that became my favorites. And in later years, I realized there was something very blues or jazzy about these. Albums were a whole big case of 78s. And one of my favorites from then was the score of Finian's Rainbow. I've since discovered that the arranger for that musical was Ray Charles. 178 by Eddie Lockjaw Davis.
Holy cow.
That completely blew my mind. Was like nothing I'd ever heard. And I said, wow, this is music.
And I didn't buy a lot of records, but I loved Dylan. And when I found him and his acoustic stuff he was putting out in those days, those poems that he wrote. And then the Beatles, of course, you know, were a big thing. And Cream, I remember listening to them, and blues. To be turned on to the blues, I said, where was this music? And I remembered it was around, but we weren't allowed to listen to it really. You know, it was kept away from us in a sense. I had an older sister, you know, and she was a rock and roll nut and a doo-wop music. So I woke up every morning to her radio playing, you know, Cousin Brucey and all the New York doo-wop stations. And then they used to have rock and roll cards, if you remember, in bubblegum, like baseball cards. And I started buying those, and there was Jerry Lee Lewis, and I thought, wow, these guys are living a life. Like, I can't believe it. He's marrying his cousin. Going wild.
I was listening to folk music, I think, and that was acceptable in our house. So, you know, Pete Seeger and then I got to Dave Van Ronk through that, and then eventually Dylan. I mean, I remember when I was at the University of Chicago when Sgt. Pepper came out, and it was like everything stopped on the whole campus. What got my attention next from the British was the Animals, because Eric Burdon is so bluesy, you know, so unlike the voice of a pop singer. And plus I loved, you know, the working class angst of the music.
I bought Richie Havens' Mixed Bag.
Really?
That's my first album that
a young woman of
with
discernment.
my babysitting money.
That was good for you.
I had a record called Morning Again by Tom Paxton. And my father bought stuff. My father had a total crush on Grace Slick. So we had Jefferson Airplane and he listened to, we had James Taylor and he listened to Dave Mason.
My mother liked show tunes. We rebelled and went for folk music. The first record was Weavers at Carnegie Hall.
Which is, you know, a great record, really.
Yeah, amazing. No, it sets a standard.
And I think the thing that would like majorly move my life was when I was about 9 years old. I saw Elvis Presley perform on the Ed Sullivan Show, Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel, with my grandparents. It was a Sunday, and I saw him perform for the very first time, and it changed my life.
Here was this moment that it was the first shot off the bow, so to speak.
That's right. It was just incredible. And everyone was moved, and the world was changed that night.
So the last time, Howard, that we talked, you mentioned what your favorite early piece of music is. So through FAST, our research network, we think it's this. There it is.
Oh, I hear the ocean. I smell the ocean. 27 years at sea, looking for sukkah.
Could you identify this piece of music?
This is Richard Rodgers and part of the operetta that became the score to the television program Victory at Sea.
Where did you go from there, Howard? From the glorious heights of Victory at Sea, what was next?
I started to like pop music. My parents had everybody's records. So I listened to Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett, Frankie Lane, Guy Mitchell. I really loved Guy Mitchell.
I mean, Laurie Eastside's music, Lee Ving. I had never heard that yelling kind of punk that Lee did, you know? That was crazy good shit. My beef bologna. Is that music? What the fuck is that? But it turns me on.
Some of the novelty records like Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Purple People Eater, all that stuff, you know? And then, I moved into the Beach Boys, Mamas and the Papas. One of the early albums I had was Joey D and the Starlighters at the Peppermint Lounge. And they had a lot of, R&B. It was like a mixed group of white and black musicians, so a lot of R&B sounds. And I also grew up in D.C. listening to the AM radio. There was a DJ called the Moon Man who we used to like a lot. It was really great to hear so much good music pouring out of the radio in the 60s.
First was a 78 RPM recording of Vaughn Monroe's They Were Doing the Mambo. My first rock and roll record was That'll Be the Day by Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Still have the same 45.
What was the first music for you that turned you on?
The Beatles, of course.
The Beatles. It was the Beatles. It was probably my first record of I Want to Hold Your Hand or something. I loved acting it out. I never thought about being an actor till way, way later or anything like that. But also the Beatles had a sense of humor to them. Their movie or watching the Monkees TV show, that kind of pop thing got right in my head.
When you were a young man, did you ever hear that Liverpool band?
Yes, well, I have this girlfriend who took me to the Cavern to see the Silver Beatles.
Jeez, you saw the Silver Beatles.
Yeah, but they were all covers. I mean, they were singing all Chuck Berry and Elvis. And I didn't even know they wrote original stuff, because they weren't singing that.
Right.
I can't remember one song that they sang that wasn't a sort of standard. But,
so they dropped the Silver, and then they went to Germany. And
they played every Friday night at the Cavern. They filled the place. It was jammed. I mean, it was insane. You literally were squeezed in. The place was tiny. They were only 30 feet away on a tiny platform, may have been 9 inches high. And I remember being totally mesmerized by the lead singer, which was John. He was a very magnetic, so was Paul, Paul too, but in those days, it was sort of John's band, I think. He seemed to be the leader, And I remember them all leaving the stage for the drum solo and not coming back. And the poor guy was like looking, going, and they were all, and I heard, you could hear them laughing, They were like, fuck him, let's see what happens. And it was fun. They were great. I remember going again, maybe a month or two later, and they were all in suits with tidy hair, But it didn't really matter. They were so together, even if you would never have heard of them again, you knew that they were something.
The night of February 9th, 1964. That was the night the Beatles played on Ed Sullivan. How did that affect you?
It affected me deeply. I first heard the Beatles in 1963. I was at a boarding school in the Valley, a Catholic boarding school. Somebody brought in a Meet the Beatles, the LP of that, and we started listening to it. So I, like everybody else, flipped for it. In the 70s, Harry Nilsson and I were very good friends.
That's what I remembered, you and Harry Nilsson. So that
and he brought me over to Ringo's house. We hung out with Ringo on more than one occasion. And then I met John Lennon next. I was in New York with Harry at that point. I said, I'll pick you up at 6 at your place in Manhattan, and we're going to go have dinner with some friends. I said, okay. And then we get in a cab together and we stop at the Dakota. He said, we're going to have dinner with friends. It can't be. Go up in the elevator, opens the door. Oh, hello there, coming in. Oh, look, Yoko, it's the bloke from Mary Hartman. He knew who I was. John Lennon was a fan of Mary Hartman, that show with Louise Lasser. Tell me what it's like. What's Louise like? For God's sake, and I'm like trying to keep my face from crystallizing and falling in chips onto the ground. So I spent an evening there in John's apartment with Yoko, and she made macrobiotic food. It was amazing.
Where were you on February 9th, 1964?
I was in labor with my son, Rex, and I went to the hospital after the Beatles had played.
Oh, yes.
I wouldn't go to the hospital. The doctor said, go down to the hospital right now. You're going to give birth. And I said, no, I'm going to watch the Beatles. And I went to the hospital. And then I had him in like 10 minutes.
This night.
Oh, a classic night for me too.
Howard, you have to tell us about John Lennon and Yoko and the Mothers of Invention.
Frank Zappa was really not a very commercial thinker. as anybody who knows Frank's music can tell you, but he really wanted to be. He had a lot of those cravings, and he would only, in an ancillary way, maybe catch a Beatles song or two, but it didn't really sink in because he didn't care. It was still pop music to him, and it made no difference. It was still flower power, and that wasn't what Frank was about. But he was impressed with John Lennon. So when I believe it was Elliot Mintz called Frank's hotel room at the Drake, and we were up there for just an afternoon rehearsal, Mark and myself. Elliot said, Frank, John Lennon's here with Yoko. He'd really like to meet you, and he's downstairs. Well, Frank was in a robe or something, but he put on pants for this. And he said, sure, come on up. One of my fondest moments is watching John and Yoko on stage with Lennon trying to sing a blues over Frank's guitar work, Ainsley Dunbar patiently being a freight train behind the whole band. He was really insane. A wonderful drummer. And Yoko screaming at the top of her lungs like a banshee, just blowing out the sound system. She didn't care. There was spittle flying. The microphones had to be burned after the show, I'm sure. And there she was in all her glory, singing, that wasn't singing, whatever that caterwauling noise was that she's making. And I had the very singular pleasure of pulling up a burlap sack over her singing frame, cinching it at the top, moving the microphone closer to her. And she stood inside the bag screaming for the entire rest of the show. Lennon up in the room was saying to Zappa, so Frank, you got any smoke? And Frank famously never had any smoke, but he was in the presence of greatness. So he said, Kaylin, you got smoke, right? Yeah, go get it. I went next door and got my stash. I had just bought a pipe in Greenwich Village that very day. And the first guy who got to smoke on it was John Lennon. I still have the pipe. It's still in this very house.
I did a movie starring a musician, Bob Dylan. It's about 93. And I had a small part, but I was in the background a lot. So they needed me for like 2 full months on that show. I had 2 scenes. In the morning, I had scenes with Bob Dylan. I remember driving to the studio in my car, and it was a warm morning, and I was playing a Bob Dylan song. Got to the set, and I walked into the dressing room, and there was just Bob Dylan getting his hair done by the senior hairdresser. I was excited to see. I started to say hello, and his hairdresser gave me daggers and said, "Good morning. Have a seat. Debbie will be with you in just a moment." In other words, sit down, shut up, nobody talks, certainly not to Mr. Dylan. So I sat in the barber chair, just like 2 feet away from him. And it's just like dead quiet. And this girl comes out and starts doing my hair, this woman. And then I couldn't stand the silence. So nice and loud, I said, this is one of those rare moments where you have a Bob Dylan song in your head, but you don't want to sing it because Bob Dylan is sitting next to you. And my hairdresser laughed. His hairdresser gave me like the look of death. Bob Dylan, for his part, didn't make a move. He was just kind of in his early morning stupor. But then, as if it took about like 15, 20 seconds for the message to go through the synapses, all of a sudden he turned to me and he goes, "Kind of unnerving, isn't it?" And I laughed my ass off. And then I was done. No need to be greedy. That was my moment. But then he started asking me about my role. I was playing a bad ventriloquist, and I was actually a real ventriloquist as part of my the magic shows I had done for decades. And he asked me, he even gave me his Bob Dylan drawl. He said, "Is it real or is it an illusion?" And so I spent 4 or 5 minutes explaining ventriloquism to him. And as soon as my hairdresser was done, his hairdresser said, "Okay, thank you. We'll see you out on the set." And so that was my cue to leave. And I'm walking out and I hear, "Oh, hey." And I turn around and Bob Dylan is looking at me through his mirror. And he goes, I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "What was the song?" And I said, "Simple Twist of Fate." And he goes, "Huh." And that was it. That was my Bob Dylan moment.
We were lighting for the scene where he sings to Stacy. And I was just talking and I said, do people treat you like Lou Reed? Meaning the fearsome Lou Reed, I'm waiting for my man and, the heroin songs and all that. And he goes, "Yeah, all the time. I get the strangest people come up to me. And it's like, I don't want to be that Lou Reed, but they tell me about the times they OD'd to my music and so forth." And I said, "Well, that must be strange." And he says, but one time I was in Manny's music store. Now, Manny's is a very famous guitar shop in New York City. Mm-hmm. Everybody who's anybody, when they came through New York, and that's everybody who played rock and roll and had money, would go to Manny's. They had the best guitars. And you could hold the guitar and play it, but you couldn't plug it in. Otherwise, the place would be, until you said, "I'm going to buy this," or "I will buy this if you let me hear it." And so Lou said I used to just go to Manny's to look at the beautiful guitars and talk to everyone. And I was there once buying these guitar strings. Now, Lou is a Jewish guy from Long Island when it comes right down to it. And he said, I'm looking across the store and there's this kid and he's got a Fender, a Telecaster. And it looks like he's getting this for his bar mitzvah. He's about 12 years old. He's this little skinny kid, and he can't believe he's holding it. And he's with his dad. And it's just like the look on his face, I've got a real guitar. And he starts to plug it in so now he can play it, see how it sounds. And Luke said, I played this game in my mind. What's he going to play? Is he going to play Satisfaction? Is he going to play a Beatles song? And he hits the chords and he plays Sweet Jane. And Lou says, I heard Sweet Jane, and I said to myself, fuck, I'm Lou Reed. It was a really sweet story.
August 18th, 1970 was Miles Davis. That's
Wow.
when I got my best pictures of Miles Davis, the ones that everybody has seen. Miles Davis, when the Bitches Brew, that period, he also played at Fillmore East Live, and it was a live at the Fillmore East album with Chick Corea.
What a
And
night that was. Miles Davis, Steve Miller Band, and Neil Young with Crazy Horse for $350, $450, and $550.
$550.
With Ike and Tina Turner. I never thought I was going to get that gig. I went home, I cut my hair like their wigs, I dyed my hair red. Tina had me sing a Supreme song, Come See About Me, and she sang backups. And I was like, this is like the ultimate moment of my entire life. She's so smart. She can hear me, she can hear the blend, and we were having fun. And I was like, I'll never forget that moment.
But the Allman Brothers, on the Friday for their sound check, were 4 hours late, which no one ever was. And we had no idea who they were. And the reason they were late is that their road manager had stabbed someone the night before. Now, and we're thinking, who are these guys? They show up in the world's most beat up VW buses, 2 of them, with them and their equipment, and now no roadie. And we helped them unload these amps and boxes held together by gaffer's tape. Remember that look? And we get them all out there. Wait, they have 2 drummers? There was not a lot of communication. We set up 2 drummers, and we're looking at these guys. And you know, like you said, we're theater guys, we're film guys, and these look like inbred Southerners, you know. Pull out these 2 beat the shit guitar cases, Dwayne Allman and Dickie Betts. And I'll always remember, they open the cases, we're going, oh, these guys are going to sound, and there are Les Paul Gibsons. If you have a Les Paul Gibson, you got to come to play. And they plugged in and they went into Statesboro Blues, and that was it. And 6 weeks later, it was probably the greatest night one of the greatest nights of the Fillmore East was a Saturday Night Late Show with the Dead and the Allmans, where they played till dawn.
That was February 11th. 1970, because that was when the Dead and the Allmans jammed, and Mick Fleetwood was there, and I got the only photograph that exists of that jam.
Oh my God, yes, I saw them. They formed the Buffalo Springfield in my living room.
I remember, and I'm sure you do too, the Grateful Dead loved the light show. There were times, and I even have a few pictures of when Jerry Garcia turned his back to the audience and just stood there looking at the light show behind him.
Yeah, dark is the word. If I had to pick one word to describe Jim Morrison, it would be dark. As you may or may not remember, the Doors opened for us when we were the house band at the Whiskey A Go-Go.
Oh my God.
And so
challenge for you.
It was a challenge for the audience, I'll tell you that. You would really see a division in the crowd. Doors people sort of hung out in the back of the Whiskey against the far wall, and the Turtle people were right up in front. They didn't care. It was Vito and Carl and those crazy acid people with the see-through clothes and Miss Pamela dancing and all that. They came to see us because we were playing happy, flower-powered, jolly, fa-la-la music. Jim Morrison would often go to Cantor's, a late-night deli on Fairfax Avenue in Los Angeles after the shows were over. We all did. They were open 24 hours and made a nice sandwich. And he would come into the place swaggering, usually with a bottle in hand. And they would make an exception in his case and let him just sort of take over the place. And he would climb up on the tables and start professing whatever he felt himself to be that night, a pirate or king of the universe or just a lowly street urchin. And there would be tableside poetry with pickles. Beautiful, nice dill pickles. And then the sandwiches would arrive, and Morrison, bless his heart, never paid. Never paid.
Wait a minute, he had all the publishing.
Lizard King, my ass. You know, the king never pays. There's the lesson.
One of the memorable events, and this was with the Dead, what they did is they strung a mirror ball way up in the top. For the opening of Dark Star, all the lights, house lights went down. We were all in total blackness. They start to really play. The mirror ball has been lowered, and all of a sudden, all the follow spots hit the mirror ball, and it sent just a cascade of a Milky Way galaxy of stars around the entire theater. And there was a completely spontaneous, synchronized gasp from the audience because it was transcendent and gloriously wonderful.
And here it is. It's Tommy. It came out on May 12th, 1969. There was a lot of excitement about it. We all gathered at my apartment on May 16th, 1969. We listened to as much of this as we could. It's a 3 LP set. And we ran off to work at the Fillmore East because we were all ushers there. And The Who were debuting live this record that night. So The Who go on and everything's great. And of course, there was such excitement. What it was is the ushering crews had 4 people. The best place to be was right down front on the aisle. You were 5 or 10 feet from the stage. You were standing in front of The Who in full flight that night. And I was down front watching The Amazing Journey, just like pinned back by the greatness of it. And I noticed there was a lot of smoke in the air. Now, 1960s in the Fillmore East, there was always quite a bit of smoke, but this was more than usual. Better go back to the top of the aisle. As I'm walking up the aisle towards the lobby, I see that the lobby is full of firemen and policemen. And as I get to the top of the aisle, some cop bursts by me, practically knocking me down, and runs down the aisle to the stage and jumps on the stage and is looking for a microphone. Well, there is no microphone on the stand because it's in Daltrey's hand and he's whipping it around above his head. And The Who are peaking with listening to you, I get the music, following you, I get the heat. Townsend turns around, sees some guy in a suit fighting with his lead singer, and without missing a beat, on this tremendous energy, does an arm swing, runs up and kicks this cop right in the nuts. And the guy goes down like a stone, and Bobby Pruitt and some of the Who's roadies grab this guy and drag him off the stage, and the audience rise to their feet. They smell blood. Everyone's screaming, and the cops and the firemen are coming down the aisle, and Bill Graham's trying to get Pete's attention, but the band peaks, and without more than a 3, 2, 1 countdown, they go into Summertime Blues. Everyone's thinking, how do we get control of this situation, except the Who are singing Gonna Raise a Fuss, Gonna Raise a Bother. Bill comes out, goes past Townsend, waves him down, goes past Daltrey, and gets the microphone and says, everyone calm down, we have a little problem. And then he proceeds to do the best thing possible. He lies to the audience. He says that we got a fire across the street and it's no problem. It's just some smoke in here and we want to open the doors and get the smoke out. What had happened is that in the front of the Fillmore East, in one corner was a little bodega and they had an electrical fire in their wiring system and it was burning. The corner of the theater was on fire. And what you got is 2,700 kids. And Bill says, and the ushers will show you out. One of the ushers at that point, with everyone at high energy, says, it's a fire drill. Everyone grab a buddy, no talking. And that crowd came down and we showed them out. The theater was empty in like 5 minutes. And all that was left was firemen and smoke. This was the most exciting rock and roll show that I've ever been to.